Hello and welcome to a special Thursday night edition of Draft Sickos. It'll still be up Monday on the podcast feed. This is the show on the No Ceilings NBA podcast network and YouTube channel where we cover everybody from the biggest of names to the deepest of sleepers. I am your host, Maxwell Baumbach, joined by the real star of the show, Stephen Gillespie. Stephen, how are you doing tonight?
I am feeling spontaneous because we are recording here on a Thursday evening. We have some stuff, kind of have to shuffle the deck around a little bit, but we stay ready. You know, we're ready for a flex whenever. And listen, last minute show. So for those who are tuning in live, really appreciate the sickos showing up regardless on a last minute thing. And also there's the playoffs going on too. So y'all are extra sick. So thanks for hanging with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm really excited for this show. So this is something that we kind of talked about a little bit for a while, trying to figure out like what we wanted to go with, how we wanted to format this. The topic today is going to be prospect problems and prospects that we have problems evaluating because they're a little bit tricky, either due to production and upside and how you weigh those sorts of things, or maybe they're way better at one thing than they are at something else. It's a fun mix of players, though. And we are going to start off with one of the hottest names in NBA draft space at the moment, Tidjane Salaun from Cholet in France. He has had a fascinating season. So Salaun was a guy that we had on our radar early in the year. I loved him like preseason. Like he was a guy that I had around like the 20-ish mark, I think at the start of the year. I faded on him pretty hard because I thought that he did not know how to play basketball. And then he's come on strong late. So now we have this just bizarre predicament of what we make of this player who is extremely raw, but very young for the class. So he is 18 years old. He does not turn 19 until August 10th. His game, for people that are unfamiliar, he's very bouncy, very athletic, scoring about 10 points per game on 40, 31.6, 74.5 splits. So not super efficient at this stage, but has some like shot making flashes, some like off the dribble flashes, hit some threes from very deep range. Pretty good rebounder, can make some plays on the offensive glass. Decision making, pretty scary. Gets some steals, doesn't block as many shots as you might think. To borrow a phrase from Draft Space legend Sam Vecini, it's an adventure with Tidjane Salaun. Like you never quite know what you're gonna get. The good is a Chicagoan growing up during the Rex Grossman Chicago Bears era. It reminds me a little bit of that, where you get good Rex and bad Rex. That's kind of what we got with Salaun. Going into this exercise, I had Salaun like late first. I've actually moved him up a little bit coming out of it. And I'll get into the theory of that in a little bit. But Stephen, I want to get your Salaun takes first. What's been your journey with Salaun, and where do you kind of see him currently? What have you been seeing on the tape?
Yeah, so I had him as an early second, right? Because very projecty player and just really not the type of dude that I was interested in, just to be upfront, you know. Sure. Like I saw a lot of the buzz, I watched the film, and I get that some guys you kind of have to squint and you kind of have to like look at a couple of like micro skills and say, okay, based on the youth, based on, you know, his basketball history, you know, the frame, the tools, all of those things, like you have to be patient with some guys, right? And I felt like I was decently patient, and I just feel like I kind of had him in my early second for the longest time. And then Maxwell, you and I were like, what do you want to talk about for the next show? And we were both just like, let's talk about some prospects that we're having a little bit of troubles on our evaluations. Like you, Maxwell, and I don't know why, like I like feel so begrudged like to do it, but he is now up my board. Now, I want to temper that because
I think we both need to.
Yeah, I see that some people have him like top 10, top 12, things like that. And I want to be careful because I feel like there's two main camps, right? There's those that are like super in, super out.
Polarizing. Yeah.
Yes. North and South poles, where I'm trying to live on the equator right now. Maxwell, like that's where I'm trying to operate.
Tidjane Salaun centrist over here. Yeah.
Yes. And He's worn on me, man. And I know that we talked about, formatting for this show, and to kind of borrow a little bit of a concept from what you guys are typically used to seeing when you watch like Corey and Albert. I wanted to give like a little bit more dedicated conversation to Salaun and the next prospect we're going to be talking about, because they're two of the hottest names in draft talk right now. And we're going to camp a little bit on Salaun because he's a name that's like getting legit top 10 buzz. I want to ask you a question, like a draft philosophy question first. How much do you think that visibility, especially whenever there is no college, we saw it at the beginning of the year, and I talked about this on another podcast I was on, where you remember at the beginning of the year when like Alex Tuhey and Ben Henshaw were like, oh, these guys could be like,
Lockie Ulbrich too is another guy where it's like, you might be a second round pick, and it's like, are we just kind of bored right now? Are we just excited?
And I don't bought it, and I don't see those guys on any mock drafts recently, right? Because there are other basketball games to watch. And now, like, we've had the combine, but we haven't had any meaningful basketball for non-NBA players to play. And I think Salaun and the next prospect are striking while the iron is like scorching white hot.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a part of it. And Dirty Dancing makes a point too. It's like Bilal building a resume when no one else is doing anything. I think there's a little bit of that. Sure. I think it certainly helps his case that he's playing in like meaningful playoff games overseas while no one's doing anything. I also just think like this is an archetype that teams are really drawn to. So despite what like the numbers say, I think he has some real upside as a shooter. He's almost 34% off the catch, which is better. But again, like actually 18 years old, like does not turn 19 until right before the start of the NBA season. 37.8% on unguarded catch and shoots, good free throw percentage, like the occasional like real deep three flashes. The pull-up stuff is like kind of bad, actually. Like when he does it, it looks pretty and cool, but like he's quite bad at the pull-up game stuff right now. I also think that like he is a coveted archetype, and that's a big part of it. I've seen like the people that are out on him, I've seen a lot of like, how do we know he's not like Ousmane Dieng or like
I think that's valid.
Like whatever. I think there's something to it for sure. I think the difference is like physical strength. Like I think he's so much stronger and burstier, whereas Dieng was like tall, fluid, and skinny. And like those guys now we know like they just get pushed around and they can't really get to where they want. I think with Salaun, my like hot take on Salaun is I think like there's probably a bit more of a ceiling just because of like the handle and feel stuff. Like I think that's like a real like ceiling capper for him. But I actually think his floor is like higher than people realize. Like I think I know there's like people that think he's like totally sucks. And I think like he absolutely needs a lot of work right now. But I think what Gigi Jackson has shown and like what Cam Whitmore has shown is that even if you've got like these deficiencies, and I don't think like either of those guys are like future stars. Like I would say I'm probably like Gigi in particular, like I'm much lower on Gigi's like future NBA prospects than a lot of like draft Twitter people that really want to hype him up. Because like the defense is still a disaster. Like the passing is still a problem. Like, but I think what this year showed us is that like if you are of a certain physical profile and like you can just kind of shoot and attack the basket, then like you can play in the NBA if you're a certain height. And like Salaun is that height. Like he's like a legit 6'9", 6'10", allegedly. Like there's been some talk that he might have grown. I think he can just like be on an NBA floor. Like Ochai Agbaji has been bad. That like he was, well, I mean, this season's technically over for him. He was not good this year, but like last year, the role he played is like a role I could see Salaun playing, where it's just like, can you just like stand over there and like not screw up and then like try to guard the ball pretty intensely and like knock down some shots? Like I really think that is kind of the game for him. And DC makes a good point here. I like Gigi and Whitmore didn't have the skill deficit of Salaun though. I think they both can. I thought Gigi was much better with his handle for sure.
They were both way more like, so pre coming into their what we're assuming is Salaun's like draft year, right?
Sure.
Pre coming into that draft year, I mean, Gigi was like, and Whitmore both were like super well known, like years in advance scouting. Like these dudes are going to be like legit prospects, right? Whereas Salaun, a little bit, but nowhere near the amount of buzz of what we've
Yeah.
seen like some of the other top international prospects get, you know?
For sure. Like if you put his like Saloon's Espoir stats from last year next to Koulibaly's, like they're not close. Like he was
Yeah.
like quite a bit behind Bilal.
And the starting point for Salaun is important to bring up too, you know, like later to basketball type dude, like still
that's
Yeah.
part of it.
Mhm.
The other thing I want to like defend him on is like a lot of people talk about like the touch with him because he's shooting 43.6% on half court layups, which to be fair is atrocious. What I will say
Okay.
is that he's still 60.8% at the rim in the half court because he dunks the ball a lot because he's very tall and he can jump high and he's strong. So I think that is like a feather in his cap. Like he is still ultimately a pretty good finisher. The other thing I'd say is that like guys like Jaden McDaniels and Jaylen Brown that have this like long, athletic, bouncy guy, athletic profile were also really bad layup half court finishers before. Like I don't think that's something that he can't overcome.
Elite
Is
athleticism
he?
for both, right?
Yeah,
And also like McDaniels was thought to have been like one of the best like defensive prospects like before even coming into like the
sure.
college level before he came in as well.
Whereas Saloon like has like some very bad defensive tendencies right now. Like he
Yes.
uh
Some interesting
some
stuff.
people call him Tidjane Salaun door, the way that he gets beat off the dribble at times. Yeah, so like there's some real like flaws to his game. Like I mentioned, like the handle is bad. High handle gets
Yes.
loose in traffic, like just gets wild downhill. Like the gather footwork and takeoff points are like you never know what you're gonna get. Occasionally we'll just be in like really weird positions off ball on defense. I think he has, so I've been like mentally using this phrase Jalen Wilson syndrome, which is like when a guy gets in position at the rim but never actually blocks shots. Like he's got a little bit of Jalen Wilson syndrome. But like he covers ground. Maybe he can shoot it. Like I think there's like a real path for him, given how much better he's gotten in like the last year, to just be like a guy that you can play in an NBA game. Like that's like my boring take on Sloan is like I think the star stuff is like not going to happen because the issues
Probably
that we're
not.
talking about. But I just think if you're like tall and athletic and like very new to basketball, I'm really optimistic about them and NBA coaching staff being able to at least teach him how to like guard the ball and improve his defensive instincts. Offensively, I think it's going to be a pretty simple game. I think it's going to be like some shoot, some rim run, like Ochai Bashi is like obviously he's much taller than Ochai, but like him, I think if you can talk yourself into the shot making stuff and like the feel getting better, maybe you can sell yourself on him being Kyle Kuzma offensively. Like that's an outcome for him. I think he's going to be like solid. And I've not seen this take anywhere that like Tidjane Salaun will be a nice NBA player. But that's kind of where I'm at with him. Like, I just think the floor is a little safer than people realize, given the tools and how rapidly he's improving and the size. Like, guys, and I don't know. Like, when I did the small guard article, one thing I noted is like if you're over 6'7", like you stay around. Like, it's really hard to wash out of the league if you're that size. But I think he's probably at too big of a field deficit to reach like a super high end outcome. What do you think of the Tidjane Salaun might be okay take that I've given?
Well, first off, I feel like if you're gonna, talk about Tony Snell, you just call him out by his name. Whenever you just say 6'7", you're just gonna stick around,
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
But, I just I want to kind of stream of consciousness through my notes because like I feel like I have like uncovered something for myself, and
Sure.
I want to vet this to you, right? Because like the title of the show is saying, like this is a prospect that we have had problems with, right? And I feel like one thing that I want to do, I'll speak for me, is like now that I'm like warming up to him, I don't want to like overcorrect. I don't want the pendulum to swing too far in the opposite direction. So I want to kind of stream of consciousness through some of these notes, right? So obviously he's the ultimate prospect. That's kind of like the tagline for me with him. Over the last 4 games, which like May has been his most important month, I think, for his draft stock.
Yes.
Like in its entirety, right? So in these 4 games, in this white hot stretch for him, almost 11 points per game, over 4 boards, almost an assist, a steal and a half, just 0.2 blocks, only shooting 45, 27, and 20% from the free throw line with 1 turnover and over 3 fouls per game. Not sexy numbers, right? So at face value, when I found this, I'm like, okay, let me turn on the tape and see what everybody is like, all the hype is about, right? He's confident, first off, right? He is like, he believes in himself at the highest level, has a little bit of FU in his game, which I think is actually kind of fun. He is taking some extremely difficult threes, right? And I think that
and I think he kind of likes to take those extremely difficult threes, which might be a problem.
So here's the thing. I like the experimentation. I like him seeing like in real time, like this is what I can and cannot get away with. But I don't always love the process. You know what I mean? Like I like the mindset, but like sometimes you just got to stop because there's some like bad misses. Like some of the worst 3-point shooting misses of the year are from Tidjane Salaun, and I genuinely mean that, right? But I do like how he gets to his 3-pointer. I like his dribble combinations. You can tell that this dude is in the gym working on moves to get open looks, right? And so a late to the game guy, you kind of like those things. He looks to go to like on the catch. He loves this like rip one way, get the defense to like bite on that rip and then slip the other direction and like try to catch them because he wants to get to the basket. He is like, he's a 3 and dunks prospect to a T, right? He either wants to catch and shoot or he wants to throw it off over the top of your head. But I do like the capability of making the next pass. He has shown a couple of short too, I would say. He's shown some short roll decisions, like, and Maxwell, I'll give you credit for this because I was on another show and we got to Tidjane Salaun and we talked about him. I was like, hey, listen, I'm about to do a deep dive on this guy, so I don't want to give away too much. But there's just so much about him that's like very toolsy. And the one thing that I said on that show, I gave you credit. I said, my co-host Maxwell says this is like, you have to look at some prospects in segments, right? And it's like, you got to look for like a point to where it feels like they get it. And then from there on, you kind of have to throw, it's important data points before that, right? To reference back to, but like sometimes prospects will get to a certain point, especially these young ones, and then they just grow from that one. And it's like all that other stuff was just like build up to get to that point, right? And I feel like he has that in his passing game a little bit because there are some pretty impressive short roll decision-making stuff where like he's going, the defense converges on him, and he'll slip a little dump pass to an open man, right? I like his off-ball activity because he's one of these he is very active and there's like a purpose to everything that he wants to do. There's like no wasted movement and it's a lot of movement. So I think that that's fantastic, right? He does little things too, like he keeps the ball high on the catch in the restricted area, which a lot of young players will dip and power load or whatever, and it gets ripped through. I don't think he has a left hand. I think he has 2 right hands, which is kind of interesting. But again, it's like one of these late to basketball guys. You kind of have to give him a little bit of time for that. He's a solid athlete for his league. You know, he loves to get in the open floor very long, and he can get above the rim well. I think he's going to kind of, especially because, you know, these French prospects, right? Like no matter how they play, like there's this connotation that like French prospects, when they come over, they're a little soft, right? And like even Rudy Gobert, 4-time defensive player of the year, took him a little bit to get like stout. You know, he's got to get that NBA strength. And I think that that's going to be important for Salaun here. Obviously would love to see some more poise, but again, the energy allows him to do things like go to the offensive glass. I think that, you know, he follows misses very well. The energy could be a little frenetic, which leads to turnovers. And again, I touched on like the passing stuff. On defense, I saw some in the chat. Shout out to the chat. I saw some like defensive stuff. Now, like you, I had this thought in my head that this dude is just trash on defense. But Maxwell, especially because he's young to the game, like his closeout techniques are pretty good. His 3-point
high hand stuff is good. Yeah. Like closes out like super high hands. Which last time we talked about him, like he does these like double extended arm closeout things, like while keeping his balance that are pretty unique.
Yes. And I think that is good. And the high hands stuck out to me a lot. Right. He does have a hard time recovering on the drive once his man has a step on him. I've noticed that. I don't think that he has the lateral mobility to handle sudden shifts from like good ball handlers. So he kind of gets to this weird thing too. And like the feet overlap, like the shuffling needs to improve, you know, getting low on drives and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's
I don't think that
foot crossing, like karaoke drill kind of stuff going on sometimes.
Exactly. And right now he doesn't have the strength to handle larger wings. Now, when you're not quick enough for wings and you're not strong enough for forwards, that puts you in a very precarious spot as a defender at his size, right? So he has some ways to go there, but I don't think it's all bad. Maxwell, overall, I do like him more than I did prior to this recent dive.
Mm-hmm.
I just worry about the refinement process with him. Now,
Yeah.
I'm going to turn this to you. I'll set the table and I'll
Okay.
turn it to you. The high-end outcome is tantalizing, but I do think that he needs a heck ton of time, right? Like he needs reps that aren't scrutinized and aren't pressure-filled, and he does need to be a player on a team where he's not viewed as like this golden ticket rookie. You know, and we've seen Bilal Koulibaly in the chat, and I know there's a French connection, but in all honesty, like this is the only prospect I could compare it to. I want him to be in a situation, Maxwell, to where he can be in a spot to where you praise the good and like you understand that there are going to be some growing pains a little bit. You know what I mean? With all that being said, he's 23rd on my board right now, and that's coming out of the second round. I could be talked into as high as like the 19 to 20 range. I don't think I could get any higher than that, which again is not as high as some other people. But again, like that's a huge leap after like another really deep dive on him, especially this last month, now that I've had the attention to give, you know, those final couple of weeks.
I think that I think I could defend taking him higher.
Okay, I would love to hear it.
If a team like Utah or a team like Chicago is just like stuck. If they're like, let's just roll the dice, screw it. Like we think he's the highest ceiling prospect on the board. That might not be my line of thought, but I would admire the courage of doing that. I do agree with you. I've got him at 15 right now, I believe.
Okay.
Like, I think that, and like I think that's it's weird. Like he's one of these guys. Like if I were to make individual team boards, he could be much higher, much lower, depending on the team. I worry a little bit, like you said, about what that development looks like, and I think a team has to be very careful about it.
100%.
If
you take this guy too high, it's like there's a burden of expectation. Yeah.
My other thing with him is I think you have to play him on your NBA roster. Like
I would love that.
I would be afraid of putting him in the G League. I think if I put him in the G League, if my coaching staff is like, look, we're not going to play him, like you've got to send him to the G League, I would be very intentional about structuring my G League team so that I have like some of the best players in the G League. Like I would try to be like, all right, I need like Sharif Cooper, I need like the Gary Clark type guys, like who are the best guys that played in the G League in recent years, and get them all on my team. Because I would want him to learn how to play complementary basketball first and foremost. I don't want him in a situation where he is like biting off more than he can chew or doing a lot off the dribble. I would want him to sort of ease in and just like take it easy and let the game come to you a little bit. Don't feel like you have to figure this all out or be the guy or whatever. Like, let's just take it one step at a time, which is why I think like a situation, again, kind of like Gigi Jackson was in this year, where it's like, hey man, our team like stinks and there's not really pressure, and like just kind of do your thing and like figure it out. I think like that's kind of ideal for him. And I worry that if I throw him in the G League, it could just be a lot. It could just be a lot. I think simplifying the game would do a lot for him.
What do you think about, if I could interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
If you take him to like, I don't know how people would feel about even stashing him internationally. Like, I think I would be more
I'd rather just have him in my organization.
Okay.
Like I'd rather have him here regardless.
I just think that, and I get like the access, right? Like the quick upload of information and skills training and all that stuff, right? The G League though is like very like kiltered in a way that's like not super translatable to actual NBA basketball would be my only thing.
Yeah.
And I think too, like what he's doing in Europe now, he's from A to B. It's been gradual, but there's yeah. So I would think that like the whole dribble, pass, shoot, like feel aspect of European basketball would actually be a little bit more beneficial. But I do understand like having the ease of access would be good as well.
Yeah, I think that's actually a fair point. My thing would just be like, you don't have direct control over it. So like, I don't know what the politics are of it. Like if they're just like, we're not going to play him because he's not going to be here next year, like then it could get kind of murky. And like, I have no idea. Like, maybe that's just not how it works.
There's probably a lot of
Talk about
mechanisms
this.
that are
Yes, but yeah, I think he's like he's one of like he's a real interesting upside swing because like if it clicks, like if he can just be like a decent 3-and-D guy with like really good tools and really good size, like that's a valuable thing to get in the draft. So I think he's like a real interesting kind of gamble. And like I said, with the gamble, like I do think it's a little safer than some people might think. Now, the issue is if you're a team that like doesn't have a lot of roster spots or doesn't have a lot of money, and this does take a while, then you were just like eating bad contract money. Like you were having years of like, oh no, like this money is just like being poured down the drain. And if it doesn't go anywhere, or the end result is just like, what if Svi Mikhailuk could really jump? You know what I mean? Like then you're in trouble. You know what I mean? Like if the end result is just like not a very good player, like then you're really kind of on your butt. But yeah,
what do you think?
I think there's a chance that he's just like good.
What do you think about? I see a lot of people mock him to like, and you know, mocks. It's close to the draft. You're probably not going to see a whole heck of a lot of a variance, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people mock him to OKC, and I get why conceptually that would have made sense like before. I think OKC is like they're done like trying because we talk about all the picks they have, but like they got like a 5-year window with these picks.
Yeah.
And I don't know when you're getting like your ultimate high-end outcome of Tidjane Salaun, you know. I don't know if it's going to be year 2, year 3, maybe year 5. I don't know.
Yeah, Sam Sheehan on Ball a while back made a comment. It was before the season, before like Memphis. I think it was like probably like a year and a half or 2 years ago. He like joked about like Memphis being like a small bean draft team of just being like, yeah, we're taking all these toolsy guys in the draft. We're getting all these guys in the draft, and it's like, why don't you like compete? Like you guys are contending. Like what are you doing? I think Oklahoma City's getting close to that point. Like I think they're getting to a point now where it's like, let's stop getting cute with it and start like thinking about winning it.
Committing.
Like it's time to go. Your window is open. Go. I know you don't want to like do something dumb and trade all your picks or whatever, but like go for it. Like now is the time, and you never know what can happen in the NBA. So I wouldn't do that. He is not a guy, and Ignacio mentions it here too. I don't think it fits OKC's timeline. I'm right there with Ignacio. Not what I would be doing if I was them.
Before the season started for OKC, yes. I
sure,
think
yeah.
It would have been. But now that they're like number 1 seed, they know how good they are. They know what their weak spots are. And they don't have very many of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm a big proponent of this in this year's draft too. Like, this is not the draft to where like, okay, what's my biggest hole? Let me draft that guy there. Like, please don't do that. You know, like get a player that fits your system and like maybe adds you a little bit of depth instead of like, okay, we don't have a starting center. At pick 17, I'm going to draft a center because we need a center. Like, please don't do that this year. You know, like draft the best available. And again, for Salaun, I want him to go to a team that's like they take their sweet ever loving time with him.
Yep.
Like no expectations.
Yeah. So I think we've come to a good point with this conversation. So we are going to take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about another international player that's been storing up boards, in Nikola Durisic. So stick with us. We will be right back on the other end as I take too long to pull up the break sound effect. All right, let's talk about Nikola Durisic. I have like never been a Nikola Durisic guy, to be completely frank. Like I was not into him last year, was not into him at the start of this year. As the Nikola Topic injury happened and he started to heat up, I got back into him more lately. I'm still not quite where some people are. One thing, and like I don't want to like call anybody out. I think it's lame when people are like, "Oh, I saw this on Twitter," like whatever. But I did think it was like kind of just fascinating that a lot of like at the same time that people were like turning on Risichet and being like, it was just hot shooting. He's not actually good. People were like, Nikola Durisic is scoring. Yes, it's time to buy Nikola Durisic stock. Like that was just like really amusing to me. Nikola Durisic is a player who, like, if he's in the draft, should get drafted. Is my scorching hot take.
You're really on fire today, Maxwell.
Yeah, we are just
Salaun is going to be okay.
Salaun's going to be fine. Durisic should get drafted. I think there's like some real hangups I have with this game still, but he had a really strong close of the season in the ABA, and he deserves real credit for it. The shot is coming along. He's making his free throws this year too, which is good. Like, he was a subpar free throw shooter last year, which made like the 21.4% from three just exceedingly difficult to tolerate. But this year, 76.2% from the line, 32.5% from threes, averaging 15.3 points per game, about 3 rebounds, almost 3.5 assists to about 3.2 turnovers. Defensive production's been better, 1.1 steals, 0.4 blocks. Had himself a great NBA combine, like athletic tested well, which was always like one of the things that, like, just the downhill movement and stuff always looked good on film. Made that really nice highlight behind the back pass during the combine that got everybody really excited. Hit
like
some shots,
Ulrich Chauncey 3.
Yeah. Well, like he had like a nice downhill dunk. Like he had some good plays where it was like, okay, you're clearly this guy's a professional basketball player. I'm still not like quite as excited as some people, but I've definitely become much more enthused and intrigued than I was a couple months back. What are your thoughts on Durisic as of now?
Yeah, he's the megastar, right? Like, you see what I did there? Played for Mega.
Yeah, that's good.
Megastar. Yeah, that's good. But
hey,
we did it at the same time.
Yeah,
we're in sync today. We're on fire. We need to do this more often. We should do a podcast together.
We should.
Right. All right, so Nikola Durisic on the season. Let me just read these numbers, right? 15 points per game, 3 boards, over 3 assists, a steal, half a block, 45% from the field overall, almost 33% from deep, 76% from the free throw line, so that uptick in free throw percentage you were talking about. Over 3 turnovers, almost 3 fouls per game, right? So numbers not intriguing, right? So I'm hearing hype, doing a little bit of research, getting ready for this show, trying to check myself before I wreck myself with my prospect feelings where I am right now. And I'm going to tell you that Durisic has made a climb up my board, right? But he went from being off my board to like middle of the second, or like mid to late second round, right? So kind of scorching hot take with you, man. Like, he's top 50 for me. I feel really confident in my top 50 prospects, right? So he's in that range, right? Solid court awareness, or at least the ability to like kind of see angles on the court that a lot of people cannot, right? Very unorthodox dribble cadence, right? Which looks great whenever he can like suddenly snap into a move and like catch the defense napping a little bit. I think he does that really nicely. He's good in transition, passing or finishing. He has a tendency to do a little bit too much with the ball, right? And I think this has kind of been like the recurring story with him, right? He will dribble into some very tight spaces. He can be a little bit too spazzy with the ball. I kind of compared him when I'm watching his film. I'm like, this dude is the juggernaut, right? Like, once he gets going, like, there is nothing stopping him, right? Like, not even himself. Like, he is just going to keep going, which helps him apply a lot of rim pressure, right? Which is fantastic. Like, the defense has to be on their heels a little bit with him, right? Great balance and coordination to pull off some like Jason Williams style layups and passes. We saw the passing, the one pass on the combine, but some of his finishing angles are just ridiculous, dude. Great use of body shielding and angles in the restricted area. Nice touch at high speeds and traffic, which I think is fantastic. Has enough lift to pull off some surprising contested dunks, like when watching the film for him. Like, he will get up and throw down over the top of some people. But he has a tendency, Maxwell, to force his way to the rim without a plan, right? Like, so he'll get to the rim and get up and then just completely decide, nope, not shooting this. Like, so I'm going to toss up either a wild finish or just pass it to somebody who is definitely not ready to catch the ball, right? For a guy who is supposed to have gotten better, I think that the confidence is there for the jump shot, getting better. The confidence is there. The release is quick. It's obviously still not consistent enough. Kind of line drive jumper too, Maxwell. Like, sometimes it doesn't even look like it's like going above the rim. I think the court vision is. Go ahead, Maxwell. You look like you had something.
Oh no, I agree with you. Like, I think that's a really weird thing about this shot that like is still giving me a little bit of pause.
For sure. I think the court vision is one of his biggest advantages, right? But it also gets him into a lot of trouble because he can really zip in some passes into some tight windows, and he can do it with either hand too, right? Um, he tends to kind of have a lot of record scratches too, which is weird to like complement his like frenetic energy to where he'll like get the ball and look like he's in Dragon Ball, just like building up like a giant Kamehameha, right? Like before he goes to the basket. The defense is obviously not where you want to see it from a guy who has been playing professional basketball for a few seasons now, right?
Mm-hmm.
His hands are down a lot, has a hard time choosing a line for screen navigation. He's not strong enough to absorb contact or fight through. He's going to bite on the pump fake every time. Like, if he is closing out on you, pump fake, you will get to the rim.
Uh-huh.
I'm telling you,
he
like,
flies by everything. Like,
everything.
Just sort of decides that's what he's going to do. It seems like regardless of who's shooting.
Similar to Salaun, and he's had more pro experience. The footwork is like foot over foot and not sliding and getting low, right? He's out of position, which has him to like sell out on these jumpers because he just does not have like the defensive fundamentals. Very handsy. He'll swipe at a ball kind of like, Karl Anthony Towns in the playoffs when he's guarding Jokic. Like he just can't help himself, just like taking a swat at the ball, right? My problem, and I've seen it here in the comments, is that I don't know how his usage translates to the NBA. Like that's my biggest thing is like, how does what he do scale down?
Yep. I think that's a great point. So yeah, on the offensive side, I think we're pretty much in agreement. Like I think he is a really good downhill driver. He's super determined, good pace. I think the passing flashes are like stellar, like really good at looking stuff off. Real uniqueness to like his angles and deliveries. Some of his transition passes that he's made have been stellar. The screen manipulation is good. He can string guys out with his dribble. Like he gets off one foot to finish. Like there's the touch can be pretty good. I am with you on the offensive role translation. Like look at Josh Giddey in the playoffs this year. And that's where I'm just like stuck. Because it's like, all right, well, Josh Giddey is a fine regular season basketball player for the most part. And then you get to the playoffs and like this stuff just doesn't work.
Minus 22 in 11 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. And like Durisic might be like a little, like maybe you could say there's like a physical strength advantage of some sort that he has over like Giddey pre-draft, but I would also say that like Giddey is just like shiftier and wigglier and like finished at a same clip with similar like percentage of his shots coming at the rim pre-draft as well. Giddey also, like I think he was probably a better defensive prospect coming out. Definitely a better rebounder. Like, can we also talk about the fact that Durisic just like does not grab rebounds? Like he's 6'7" and just does not rebound. The defense I'm with you is the best. I think like there's the effort stuff, which you can talk yourself into like, well, he does like cover ground. Okay. So like maybe if he's in a lesser role, like he'll just take that a little bit more seriously and refine that. But like on ball, he's bad. Like he resorts to fouling a lot. Mm-hmm. The effort on like even like switches is bad. And he gets like spun around more than any player I have watched in this draft cycle. Like I don't think I've seen a single player who does a spin move on defense more often than Nikola Durisic.
Looks like, over both shoulders in one possession and to contest a three, that's bad.
Like there's just some stuff where I'm like, man, like the footwork's rough. Like there's just a lot of stuff that if there was other things in place that were a bit more like NBA functional, I could sell myself on like this will come around. But as to your point, like this guy who's played professional basketball for a couple of years, he's getting up there. The defense is like not good.
No.
The energy isn't great, which like even with like Salaun, it's like if you're just like big and hustle, it's like you can make things happen. Like I don't really get those vibes from Durisic necessarily. But again, like he's 6'7" and just like knows how to play basketball on offense. So I think that helps him a little bit. Like I don't think he would be a complete train wreck. I just think there's a real issue as far as like what the utility is for this on a winning team. Like a downhill non-shooter who does not rebound and struggles mightily on defense. Like I just can't get too excited about that. Like, I think he's a fine guy to take in the second round at the point of like,
sure,
well, let's just get a guy that like we think might be able to play in a couple regular season games. Like, if that's what you're looking for, like I think he's your guy in the second. And I think maybe if the shot gets there, like I could see how you could talk yourself into it. It just, to me, it feels like I'm talking myself into a lot of things for a guy who like doesn't have exceptional tools. Like I don't know. And yeah, I'm a little stuck with him.
I'm with you. And so I tried Maxwell. Like, I'm like, okay, like what are some?
I like him a lot more than I did too. Like
100%. Yeah, I went from not being in my top 60 to now is in my top 50. And again, I feel very comfortable with my top 50. Right. My thing is with him though is like, for people who are looking at what he's doing now and saying, well, he can just scale it down. Like, I'm trying to find like. He spent advanced stat show
isn't that high either. Like his usage, like in part of it is that like he was off ball like part of the year.
Yeah.
But like his usage is like the average usage for a forward prospect pre-draft. Like it's not like he had a 35 usage rate or something.
Right. And listen to this, dude. Like per synergy, everyone's favorite opener to a sentence, right? Per synergy, he cut only on about 4% of his total possessions. Right. He only had 3 possessions where he operated out of a handoff, and he was used in any off-ball screen action under 7% of the time. So, like, what are we looking at that makes us feel like he is like Maxwell? There are some people that think that this is a first-round, like lottery level prospect.
I think if you believe that he can shoot and you think that the defense is an easy fix, I can like get the idea of him being like. The comp I remember like 2 years ago was like, is he a blend of the Bogdanoviches? And like, I think there's still a way that you can talk yourself into that. I think I'm just quite low on what he's going to bring defensively and as a rebound. Like the rebounding really bugs me. Like it's exceptionally rare to see guys that don't rebound, like pan out in the NBA, but especially like the further up the lineup you are. Yep. And yeah, like just the effort stuff. I think the idea is that like maybe because he made like 37% of his like unguarded catch and shoots, that you can use him as the spot up player. And maybe he knocks down those open shots and then teams have to close out. And then he has that driving package and he can get into some passing. And like, if he's a tertiary option, then he's a real plus playmaker as like a fourth option.
Second ball handler and a second unit type guy.
Yeah. Like, but to me, it just comes back to like, you really need the shot for that, and even then, like the defense is what it is. Like I don't know. Like I would, if I'm going to bet, if TJ McConnell plays defense though, like as small as TJ McConnell is, like he's a pest at least. Like at least there's something. Yeah. TJ's a guy I thought about with like a lot with somebody else that we'll get to later, actually. Oh boy. But like if I'm going to bet on a guy who can't shoot, I would rather bet. Or like a guy that has shooting questions, I should say. I shouldn't say a guy who can't shoot. I would rather bet on somebody like Neek, where it's like Neek Clifford, I know, is going to rebound and he's going to play defense and he's going to make plays and he's going to like get out in the open court. With
AJ Mitchell.
Yeah. Well, like AJ Mitchell just has like a much higher level of feel too, and like is also like a good rim pressure finisher guy. Like I love the flashes with Durisic. It just is not totally cohesive to me.
Dude, I'm with you. And like, that's why I'm like, I'm trying to throw something out there to like, what can we parallel this guy next to? Like, show me. And I know not everybody likes comps. Like comps are, and we know like
they're
super
important
caveats one way or the other, right? Like I understand that like a comp is not like a direct, like 1-for-1, like cookie cutter mold, but like, give me the role. Like, give me the player role. The role
is the biggest thing. Like, give me a guy with a similar body type who plays a role. It's like it's generally like what I'm looking for, and like preferably somebody who's actually good. You know what I mean? Like, or so that I can envision myself like, oh yeah, this is like this is a guy I would want to play on my basketball team. But then I don't know, like. I also think again, like if you're over 6'7", it helps a lot. So like I think it'll help like keep a foot in the door. To me, there's just like more interesting upside prospects that I think have more playoff functionality, and I have a real hard time getting over that. And like I always say, like you've got to play in the regular season first before you can play in a playoff game. Like I think there is value to being a playable regular season guy. I just we've seen it go wrong too many times with this guy. And like I looked, so Nikola Jovic is like another guy that I've seen put up in relation to him because they both played for Mega, and Jovic was much better this year for the Heat. Like had a really
They're both
nice,
named Nikola
nice
too,
season.
which
Yeah.
yeah.
If you have to be named that if you play for the team, it's part of the rules. But Jovic was a better rebounder, like better passer, like much better catch and shoot prospect. Like there was just
athlete,
a lot
I would venture,
more,
and stronger maybe.
No, I think Durisic is stronger. Like I think Durisic is like
Okay.
quite strong downhill. And like Jovic was like so skinny, but I think like Jovic just like by being able to like catch and shoot and rebound, like it at least gave you like an idea of like he can rebound and then run the break. He can stand over there and shoot threes. Like there was just so much like it was so much easier to talk myself into that guy. Where like this,
and there was
is, like,
3-pointing like supporting metrics and like film
yeah,
too. Like, you know,
yeah,
like
this is just too tough for me.
Again, Rose my board, right? Like I'm not saying don't touch this guy. Like he's definitely draftable to me now, but like again, try to prevent the pendulum from swinging, like overcorrecting where dude, again, like there's legit first round buzz surrounding this guy's name right now. And again, like if we're just saying swing for the ultimate fences, but I guess sure, like there might be a fence, but I don't know. You know, I have a hard time with the role, but I do see the things that he's good at, and I think some of that could translate. You know,
I do too, and I think that like I think if a team believes that they can get him to a serviceable like point on defense, then I'm like much more forgiving of that idea. I just think that's a little far fetched for me. Let's do. Do you want to do a break and then do the next couple guys, or do you want to squeeze in one more? Let's do a break and then let's do the college guys if that works. Oh. You're on mute at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I'm trying this new like button thing to prevent people from hearing my mouse click. But yeah, let's break and then we'll hit the back three.
So we're gonna do a quick break and we're gonna get to 3 college prospects that they have us a little confused still. So stick with us. Up first, it is everybody's favorite guy who is very good on one side of the ball. It's Ryan Dunn. Ryan Dunn is a tricky predicament. He played at Virginia this past season. Getting the combine measurements pulled up, I feel like I remember being like a little disappointed with how he measured in a way. So Ryan Dunn measured 6'6" and a quarter. Oh, no, it's fine. 213.6 pounds, 7'1.5" wingspan. So ultimately a case of you weigh enough and are long enough that I kind of don't really care about the listed height. 8.1 points per game, almost 7 boards, 0.8 assists per game, 1.3 steals, 2.3 blocks, 54.8% from the field, 20% from 3, 53.2% at the free throw line. So it's some good and some bad. It is a guy who really struggles to put the ball in the basket, especially when he is not at the basket. But my goodness, like we are talking about a historically productive defensive player. 10.4 block rate, 3.1 steal rate. Wild stuff. Where are you at with Ryan Dunn currently? Because he's the guy where you've done your dive on him. I still have to do my deep dive on him. I kind of think he's going to get taken in the first round just because he's elite in one area, and you got to hope you figure out the rest. But what have you got with Ryan Dunn?
So I still really like Ryan, right? And I hate that he might be one of my least favorite big board casualties that I've had on my board, right? Because now he's 24th, and Maxwell, you remember at one point I was saying like,
he's kind of got to go top 20, yeah.
Would the Hornets kind of like look nice with him and Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, and like that's where I was earlier on in the season, right? But he's 24th on my board now. I hate that, but there's a huge hodgepodge of prospects that like I could argue myself up and down or ranking too, you know? So let me do offense first because he plays like a small ball 5 at Virginia, right? And I feel like that's kind of like status quo for them. If they get like an athletic 4, he's going to see a lot of playing time at the 5, right?
Yeah, the days of like Jay Huff are over. Like it just seems like they did not have that guy this year.
No, not at all. And so he sets a lot of screens and he finishes around the basket almost exclusively. He does show towards like as the season progressed, like we look at the 3-point shot and we're like, ew, gross, yuck, right? But if you look at some of the stuff that he started growing into as the season progressed, he does like have some pretty nice touch indicators, like on high floats or post fadeaways away from the basket. Like he covers a lot of ground on those fades too. It's like actually pretty good ground coverage on those. He utilizes his strength very well. And I think that when we talk about athletes in this draft, Ryan Dunn might be one of the most underrated athletes in this class, because I mean, he finishes above the rim with ease, effortless hops. He's almost got, what I call helium legs. Like it's harder for him to stay on the ground than it is to jump in the air. And he can finish with either hand and in traffic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's also a very instinctual cutter to the rim. Excellent timing, right? Like there are several times where like he sets the screen and he doesn't just dive because he set a screen. Like he'll delay the cut to the basket depending on what the ball handler is doing to maximize like how open that he can be. And I just love that too, right? He does a good job of protecting spacing. Like he doesn't occupy the same space as a lot of other players on his team, right? And he moves to the rim after setting screens. I talked about that. Finished in the 85th percentile at the rim, 89th on dunks. And he attacks the glass on the offensive end too, right? So he does things that, again, like are important on the offensive end. He just doesn't do the one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not an ideal wing ball handler either, but I do think that he does enough to be like a steady 4 in the NBA. You okay?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah, just coughed my brains out over here.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that you were good.
Sorry about that.
No, all good. And he's not a player that finishes with his left hand enough, despite driving to the left over 54% of the time. But again, the shot's the biggest problem. 20% on catch and shoot, 18.5 on unguarded, 40% on dribble jumpers, but that was only on 10 attempts. Free throw numbers are about the same over 2 seasons, so that feels like it's kind of is what it is for a little bit, right? And that's where I am with the offense. And we can wax poetic about the defense because it's beautiful. Like if you ever love beautiful defense, like he's the guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he can guard, like genuinely guard so many positions well. He's incredibly strong. He's exceptionally light on his feet. His balance is unbelievable. Like he is so good. It just like covering large swaths of ground and then like immediately changing direction like nothing happened. Like he is so good flying around the court. And like I remember who it was. Yeah, I think it was Keezus in the chat mentioned like his functional explosion is silly. Like he just gets off the floor so high so easily that it's really impressive. Like there's just not a better defender out there, like period, point blank. He is going to come into the NBA. He's going to be able to lock guys up, and he's going to be able to defend exceptionally well within a team concept. Like there's not a hole that you can poke in his defense. He's a great rebounder for his size. I actually think that was a scream for no reason from Morgan, who is now trying to appear on the podcast. She's trying to get on the camera. But so Ryan Dunn is also like quite good at driving. I think like he did a really nice job of just like getting to the basket. He drives like a Mac truck. He's really strong. He's good at like, there's so few good drivers in this class. Like I keep beating this drum as I do these deep dives. Like there's so many guys that just cannot put the ball on the ground in a straight line and get to the rim and finish. And like Ryan Dunn can at least do that. So you can kind of talk yourself into the idea of him as like a 4 next to a shooting 5, which is
I agree.
You hear a lot. But again, like there's just not a lot of shooting 5s. Like there's a reason that a lot of guys are 4s that could be nice next to a shooting 5. And there's not a lot of shooting 5s. So those guys don't tend to pan out as well. The shot is like a big problem. And like, we're not only talking about a subpar shooter, we're talking about like an abhorrent shooter. Like we were talking about like a historically outlier bad shooter. And then I think you get,
so there's nowhere to go, but
like, yeah, I guess, but like, but it's also one of those things where like, if you're talking yourself into, let's play Ryan Dunn as a small ball 5, it's like, well, then you need the other team to go small too, and like even then it's like that kind of takes away some like the ground coverage stuff, like if he's just sort of under the basket more often. Like there's some flaws with that idea as well that I'm like not crazy about. I do think his interior passing is like a little better than people realize, because like he had a low assist rate, but I think he actually like has some juice downhill as far as like seeing the floor and stuff goes. I think he's going to be extremely fit dependent. I don't think he's ever going to shoot. And I also think that like he's not just like a bad shooter, like he's like a hack-a-shack target, like at 53% from the free throw line. Like this isn't just like, oh, he can't shoot. It's like he might be completely unplayable in big moments.
And I think that that's totally fair. I think that he does have good offensive skills that matter, and I think that the defense is as close to elite as you're going to find in this year's draft, right? So I do think that if you're looking at different draft philosophies, you just draft a dude with an NBA skill. Like this is a guy, and in a draft any given year, there's roughly like, I don't know, like 20 players that typically like stand through the test of time. So if you want to go down that draft philosophy, I think, Dirty Dancer in the comments, he agrees that he's a second round pick and not a very good first round pick. And there are worlds where that's true, right? But if you are of the mindset to where in a draft where only about 20 of these dudes are going to pan out, you take a dude with an NBA, skill set, or at least one that you're elite at. I think that Ryan Dunn should be a back half of the first round guy. Like that's just where I am. And there, I'll be honest, Tidjane Salaun like leaped him like today when like for my deep dives, like we're out over, I would say 48 hours, but he leaped him, and he's been one of like the biggest casualties of like late risers on my big board. And I hate it because I still have a pretty large affinity for him. I think that he's a valuable player, you know what I mean? So it's just that the one thing that he's not good at is like the one thing that you have to be at least decent at. And I don't know if he ever gets to that level.
Yeah, and DC even makes like the Vando comp, like he could be Vando-ish, but like even then, it's like I think the margins on those types of players are really thin. Like look how tough it got for Jared Vanderbilt this year when he had it down here. Even the guy like Xavier Tillman, so it can be really tough. The kid's having a massive meltdown. Someday have you throw it to our next prospect here.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go to our next guy. A player that was a big favorite of No Ceilings towards the beginning of the year. And no, I'm not talking about Justin Edwards. I'm talking about the one and only Baylor guard, or maybe wing now. I don't know. Jacoby Walter. And Maxwell, he is another one of these dudes that, like, as the season has progressed, he has kind of fallen down my board a little bit. And I feel less bad about him falling than I do about Ryan Dunn, because the thing that Ryan Dunn is good at, he has stayed good at. And the thing that we thought he was going to be good at, obviously he was. Jacoby Walter on the year, dude, over 14 points per game, 4 rebounds, 1.5 assists per game, 1 steal, 0.2 blocks, 37.6 field goal percentage, 34.1 3-point percentage, 79.1 free throw percentage, very low turnovers at 1.3, and only 2.5 fouls per game. So Maxwell, just to be transparent to the audience, like this was the prospect that like one of the prospects, but this was like the number one guy that I brought to the table, because he almost feels like he kind of has to be in the mix in like that top 20 range. But the more I'm looking at other players, I'm kind of like falling out of love with the idea that he necessarily has to. And I know that you have kind of like been a little bit more where I am now for a little bit longer. So one, I hate it, right? Like, and I'm sure that you're not a big fan that you have him this low either, but it's just very confusing to me. And I want to turn it to you because I know that he fits this player archetype that you speak to often. He's that like not quite a wing size player.
Yeah. Those guys always scare me. So let's focus on the good real quick. So I like Jacoby a lot early on in the year. And he is like just rapidly falling down my board right now.
Yeah.
I do buy the shot with him. I do think he's a really good shooter. He took a ton of threes, 11.6 per 100 possessions. And like we know that volume is like a really good indicator of future NBA 3-point percentage. Like the 34.1%, like it is what it is. But I think
tough looks. Yeah.
it's important to note that, yeah, like this is a guy who was taking a ton of them as a freshman, just like in a difficult role, like on a really good team where like he just had to hit shots for them at times. He made movement shots too. Like there's some real like NBA range to him. He was 40.9% on threes off screens. 6 for 13 on threes off handoffs. Like there's some stuff that like indicates there's real kind of movement shooting upside to him, which is exciting. He rebounded the ball well, for his position, if not mistaken. Had a solid steal rate. Yeah, gets fouled a ton. Like gets fouled a lot. Like draws a lot of fouls. Like I call it like the Moses Moody foul drawing thing, where it's like Moses Moody like wasn't this like big downhill attacker, but like he was really good at just getting guys like tangled up in his reach when he takes those mid-range shots or threes. He measured real well at the combine. 6'4" and a quarter, 197.6 with a 6'10" wingspan. Like that's good. I like to see that a lot.
I like the shoulders, like the upper body.
Yeah, he's pretty well built. The defense is interesting, and that like sometimes I thought it was really bad, and then there was other times I was like, oh, I kind of like that. Like there's moments where he can really smother a guy. He's not afraid to put his body on people. The ground coverage is solid. Like he athletic tested really well too. Like there's some clear functional athleticism to him. Other times, like he's getting hung up on screens. I do think there's some athleticism. You see it most as a driver, where like he just doesn't gather his feet well at all. Like he was a horrific transition finisher. His driving footwork in general is bad, which like I think he likes to settle in the mid range, like just because those are the kind of the shots he likes to take. But I think part of that is that he is like bad at the rim because he drives weird and like can't get his feet under him to explode and jump properly. Yeah, there's just some like real limiting stuff. And then at the end of the day, like I want to like this guy who's got good athletic tools, who tested well athletic, that takes a lot of threes. I like all that stuff. Wasn't a terrible decision maker. But then I just like look analytically at how he graded out compared to other guys that have made it historically. And he's just below average, a lot of stuff in terms of his usage, his field goal percentage, his effective field goal percentage, the 3-point numbers, what he shot off the catch, his rim pressure, his rim finishing, the assist rate, the block rate, like just all these indicators are just like below what they're supposed to be. So then I'm like looking at it, it's like, well, the data just says like he's probably not going to be a guy that pans out, or if he does, he's going to have a pretty like moderate outcome. And then you ask yourself what the ceiling is. And I think it's kind of limited because he doesn't have awesome feel for his size. Like we're not talking about a great defender or a guy who has his athleticism displayed in a super functional way. And it's just like to me, he feels like the kind of guy where if it clicks, like he can have a nice NBA career, but he ends up being a guy that you like pay a little too much money to. And you're like, uh-oh. Like we paid a lot of money to a guy who shoots and like doesn't really do a whole lot else. Like I want to like Jacoby Walter. I wish I was like really into him at points during the season. It just felt like by the time conference play got here and he was playing a tough schedule consistently, it was just really hard for him. And it's just hard. It's hard for me to keep him in the first.
And I'm starting to get that way. He has fallen down my board quite a bit. I want to ask you a question. It just popped in my head as you were explaining them. Like you do this all the time where like you explain something and I paint a picture of like a different player in my head to like try to like correlate with. Other than age, what is separating Matthew Murrell and Jacoby Walter? That's a scary proposition, but it just came into my head, and I'm thinking like skill set.
Because one of those guys is like largely talked about as like could be a nice two-way target, and the other one we're talking about is a first-round pick.
Do you need some time to think on it? Yeah.
No, that's a real question, just from like a pure like productivity standpoint. Like the age is like a real thing. Like it's important.
100%.
but
It is a big deal.
I don't think that's an unfair question to ask. And this stuff happens every year, right? Like every year, it's like, well, like like there are guys that go undrafted that end up being really good. That before the draft, like if you would have been like, hey, Brandon Pajemski is going to make all rookie first ahead of Scoot, like people would have been like, no, he won't.
Yeah, Nas Reed is going to be a like, 6th man of the year in the NBA.
Sure, yeah, like there's all this stuff that like pre-draft sounds nuts, but I think that is like a fair question. That's the problem that I'm having with Jacoby Walter is just like, the longer I think about what the upside like potential is, like the less excited I am considering what the floor is.
Yeah, like who is the best player of his archetype type thing,
like
right?
Gary
is it
Trent.
like a Bradley Beal? Like, is that?
I don't think he's even Bradley Beal. Like, I don't think he's got like the sauce that Bradley Beal has. I think like I really think he's like Gary Trent is like the guy that I just like always think about with him.
Yeah, and I'm starting to get to that point, and again, I hate it, man, because like, all right, so let me get into my little bit of analysis here, right? It's incredibly weird to watch like how he moves and like how the dribble and everything looks and how inefficient he was, right? Like I almost wonder if like he had like an outlier year of production based on just watching him play basketball. You know what I mean? Because he's strong. Mm-hmm. Like I know that we talk about like his athleticism and bursts and stuff being average. I think that he's a pretty strong athlete. I would say, right? I love the way that he can move off of the ball. His ball handling, specifically like his dribble combinations to get into his shot, are pretty tight, which I think helps with the turnover numbers, right? Because he takes good care of the ball, and like he's not, again, straw man here, but he's not Kyrie Irving, like super dramatic crossovers or anything like that.
He's also like a one-handed dribble guy. Like he's the guy who goes right every time, or like he goes right every time. Yep.
Yeah, that was a big note of mine that stood out for sure. And you brought up the free throw rate. Like he's not afraid of contact, but he just like he can't finish, right? Like he drove on almost 16% of his possessions. He's in the 15th percentile at the rim, 18th percentile on layups, and he drives right 64% of the time. You know what I mean? He did rank in the 64th percentile on runners, which does show that level of touch that extends obviously to the 3-point line. And again, the free throw rate of 80 or 48.9 is just weird, but he only had 4 dunks, right? So yeah, it's like weird combination.
To me is like the footwork thing. Like I really think like the way he gets his feet under himself is just bizarre. Like at every level of the floor, like it's just not super functional.
Yeah, it's wild, man. Like the shot is good. I do think that he can kind of be locked into the shot a little bit too much, which shooters, you want to have confidence that they can hit anything in the world whenever they can, but you also want them to have just enough like realism in their abilities to be like, maybe it's okay to pass a little bit too. Right. I like the movement shooting, but outside of that, like the rebounding is okay. I worry about the connective stuff, man. I legitimately worry about like the everything else aspect of his game. And that's why he's fallen for me. Like, I'm not going to sit here and like say that he won't be in my first round, but also like don't be surprised if he's not in my first round either.
Does it make you feel like any better if I tell you that with under 4 seconds on the shot clock, and the sample size on this isn't big, this is like 39 shots, he was 21.1% on twos and 33.3% on threes? But with over 4 seconds left on the shot clock, he's 44.1% on twos and 34.3% on threes, which like, so it's like a decent amount, like a little bit of this inefficiency is like partially tied to like him having to be a guy who eats the grenades sometimes at Baylor, which is like roughly, that's like 10% of his shots, like on twos and threes. So it's not like a huge factor,
but I'm not worried about the shooting.
So,
though.
But what I'm saying is like, does the efficiency feel a little bit like, okay, well, like that's not going to be his role. Like the thing that hurt his efficiency is not going to be the thing that hurts his efficiency at the next level. Or are you just like not even worried about the efficiency as much?
I'm not worried about the shot. It's like literally the everything else aspect of his game, right? Like low assist guy. But again, like Ray J. Dennis kind of dominated the on ball stuff, right? So like, do you kind of give him a little break where some of these Baylor guards almost kind of need a little bit of like a Kentucky bump in a sense in terms of like ball handling, creativity. Maybe I don't know. And like that's like the type of conversations that I find myself having to have with Jacoby now, where it's like, how do I justify where I have him other than the fact that like at some point it's like my Bottas Buzelis ranking. Like I have him like I think 15th or 16th, and it's like at some point you kind of have to believe like some of the hype that came in. Like at some point you kind of have to think that this guy might actually be that good, you know? And I know that you feel way different about Bottas, right? That's a whole nother conversation.
I like Bottas, yeah.
Yeah, and like you and I are worlds apart on him, right? But I'm starting to like be on Planet Maxwell with Jacoby. And it's not because
I don't like it. I
want
to like him a lot. Like the intel on him is very good. Like I would love to be all in on Jacoby Walter. I'm having a hard time. Let's do Isaiah Collier, because like Isaiah Collier is like fascinating to me. And he's like, I would say one of the guys I'm most nervous about getting wrong in this class, because there are people that are like, that I respect, that I like a lot. They're like, he has to go top 5 in this class. And like, I was never there. Like even like early in the year, like when he was really killing it, I was just not like that into him. I probably liked him more after like watching his AAU tape than I did like at any other point. So Collier played at USC this season. 16.3 points per game, just under 3 rebounds, 4.3 assists to 3.3 turnovers, 1.5 steals per game, 0.2 blocks, 49% from the field, 33.8% from 3, 67.3% from the free throw line. Extremely strong player.
Yes.
Like built like a just he's a big dude, like 6'5". I like
looks like a running back.
Not 6'5", actually. Now that we have his real measurements, he was 6'2.5". 6'4" and 3/4 wingspan, but 205 already. Like gonna come into the league like ready to plow through people. Had a bizarre season at USC, like had like a game that people loved out of the gate that like against Kansas State. Had some real severe turnover and shooting issues, came back, shot a little bit better, took better care of the ball. Kind of one of those guys that's all over the map, like still has like real fans based on like the physicality and the passing and just the downhill ability. Like he is a tremendous rim pressure guard and a tremendous finisher. Conversely, I think it's easy to look at him. The fact that he shoots a set shot, was bad at the free throw line, and just be like, well, is he going to be able to do that against NBA competition? And the defense was pretty rough at times. Like the defense is like all over the map. Like when he throws his body on a guy, it's like the James Harden thing where it's just like, oh, that guy cannot move him backwards. Like he can't do it. Like he can be really strong. But again, this is a guy who doesn't rebound. The off-ball engagement is like way up and down. At his best, he's like exploding into passing lanes, stealing the ball, running the length of the court. Like that stuff is good. On a possession by possession basis, it's not always that. I'm really confused by Collier, but I'll get into some of my like ideas with him and like why I'm not like all the way out. I'm not all the way in either, and we'll get to that in a second. But where have you been with Collier kind of throughout this cycle?
I'm like trying to dip my toes into the pool and like wait for the temperature to be just right for me to jump in, right? Like, does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
There's so much like on paper and just Maxwell, I say this on the show all the time. Like when I talk about like small school prospects, like a Wesley Cardette, like if you want to know who Wesley Cardette is, just turn on a Chicago State game and look for the guy who looks like an NBA player.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that is where I am with Isaiah Collier. And there's something to be said about that. Like you have to have like the requisite amount of strength and athleticism to like really have a meaningful shot to be something in the NBA. And that is where Collier gets his foot in the door. And I found myself trying to compartmentalize the USC experience for him, right? Because to kind of take a page out of, Colin Cowherd's book, whenever he talks about how noisy a team is, like when Colin talks about like the New York Jets or like the Dallas Cowboys or teams like that, where it's just noise, like you're not going to have a whole heck of a lot of success around that. Like USC to me, there's a lot of noise, like, and I don't feel like I saw that until it was over. And then thinking back on it, it's like, man, Collier, like top 5 prospect, turned the ball over a lot. He's falling off the map. Bronny James, like crazy heart condition, Uwachuku coming off
Had the
of a
same thing last year. Yeah.
crazy thing happened. Kobe Johnson supposed to
Collier
be
for
like a
Kobe. Yeah.
top 20 seat. Yeah, like so very and of course Boogie Ellis on that team is just like a bucket getter, right? And it's like we're seeing the same thing from Boogie in the middle of all of this, and it's just like, man, USC was so noisy. So how do we separate the on-court production from the almost circus that USC was? And I found myself really down on Collier throughout the year, but now I'm like starting to kind of like course correct a little bit back, because no matter how inefficient some of these, like, and again, I'm not saying Collier is like the same level of athlete, but you know, we've seen it time and time again, Maxwell, where like some of these dudes highly touted, they go to school, college just really isn't the thing for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're highly valued before they come into their pre-draft season. They still have like all the requisite athletic tools that they need to succeed in the NBA, and tools go a long way for development of young players like this, and they succeed. So I'm trying to like navigate this, and this is why he is like a problem prospect for me, because you kind of have to look, do you want to value the potential of him or the production of him? And even like the negative production stuff on him was like, well, he can't take care of the basketball, but was a positive assist to turnover guy. And we're like
Mm-hmm.
also in the same breath and on the other side of our mouth, like really propping up guys who did not take good care of the basketball.
Yeah.
And like also made bad decisions, who aren't as athletic and strong as Isaiah Collier, and nor were they as highly valued coming into this season, right? So it's really like, to answer this question without really answering, it's like it's really hard. Like I have him like in this like 14 to 16 range, and I hate it because he can
Yeah.
make
That's kind of
everyone
where I
look
have him.
so stupid. You know what I mean? And like I think we all acknowledge the fact that he has the potential of almost anyone else in this draft class, to where he could be the breakout dark horse guy and just like leaves everyone in the dust. Like GG Jackson last year, like second round draft pick,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like looks phenomenal. Like we all think that Cam Whitmore fell too far.
Mm-hmm.
Zaire Williams fell. Jaden McDaniels fell. And like the list of these guys goes on and on and on,
Mm-hmm.
of like, what were we thinking? Like the indicators were there, and like college isn't for everybody. Like that's kind of where I
Yeah.
am with Collier.
Yeah. Where I struggle with him is I think there's areas where people like snub him way too much, and I think there's areas where people give him like a little too much credit. Like I think
Sure.
like I think people like really ate up like, oh, he came back and he didn't have to and he was awesome and whatever. And then like you look at those last couple games and he was like back to turning it over all the time. Like
Yeah.
it reversed. Like so over his last 7 games, 4 assists to 3.4 turnovers, like he had some real turnover woes. His last game of the season, he had like 3 assists and 6 turnovers. Like there are some issues with him as far as like premeditating reads, forcing stuff that
Yes.
isn't there. Like the read of the floor is still an issue. It's not all the way there yet. But there's just like not a lot of guys that get downhill like this guy. Like he is an outstanding, like 41.6% of his half court shots, or 41.2% of his half court shots came at the rim, which is unreal. Even with the like attentiveness issues I talked about on defense, 2.8 steal rate.
Yes.
Like it's all stuff where it's just like, okay. And like still had a solid effective field goal percentage, despite like all of those issues with the shot. So it's one of those things where it's like if his rough year was still like ultimately pretty productive and he's still meeting like different NBA productivity thresholds for guards, like is he like a really bad 3-point shooter? Yeah. Is he a tentative 3-point shooter for his position? Yep. Is he kind of behind the curve both as a catch and shoot guy and pull-up guy? Yeah. But like as Dirty Dancer says, like the intersection of strength and quickness he has is so rare. Like this is my bizarre TJ McConnell predicament. We're like athletically two totally different kinds of athletes. It's like two different like body types, completely. But I wonder if there's a path for Isaiah Collier if the passing feel stuff comes along to be this rare guard that like doesn't really shoot or doesn't really need to shoot to become a really productive player. Now, how he makes his defensive impact is going to have to look entirely different. It's going to have to be a lot more physical. It's going to be a lot more passing lane stuff than just like being an on-ball pest. But I wonder if that's like a path for him. Like I think
got the tools
just, like,
to do it, right?
Yeah, like I think there are these like bizarre, like positive outcomes. Like I've been using the phrase like positive downside outcomes for prospects, where it's like, what if this does not work out the way we want it to, but it still works out in a way that's kind of good? Is like something I've been trying to think about with players a lot. Like I love that. That's kind of what I've been thinking about with Collier. Is like, is there a way for him to just be this like really effective downhill guard, because he's going to be so difficult to keep out of the paint, like even without a shot. The passing like needs to shore up though, and if I get the spacing comments, it's like, all right, we got the spacing with Cade Cunningham, and like he's still turning the ball over a lot. So like some guys that turn the ball over a lot in college are just guys that turn the ball over a lot. That is what it is. And like if he's that, and the defensive like intensity doesn't come around, and he's not as consistent, he's not rebounding, like it could be really tough for him. And like I think the floor is a little bit shaky. But I ultimately think like the tools are really impressive, and there's just not a lot of guys that put pressure on the rim like he does. And I just wonder, like, if you turn him into like I do not like what the shot looks like at all, but I wonder if you can just like get him to be an okay catch and shoot guy, then like he's just going to be a nasty secondary guy.
Maxwell, my thing is like development for prospects. Like we all look at prospects, and I fall victim to this, right? That's why it's important to go back and look and like get intel and just like reflect holistically, like once the season's over, right? USC is not like a developmental powerhouse. You know what I mean? So like,
yeah,
I don't think that you look at Collier going to USC and like, man, I think he's got a really good shot of getting better while he's at USC. It's mainly just he's a high school player playing D1 basketball at that point. You know what I mean? He doesn't have like what I think Kentucky might be able to do under Mark Pope, or what Villanova has done for players historically, right? Like it's not a program where people go to get better. It's like Hollywood Light, essentially, is what it has been. And now with with Coach Muss, I don't think it's going to get any less like that. But I don't think that Collier going to USC, maybe it was like false hope that we were expecting him to like turn things around there. And I think that because we watch other players get better throughout the course of the season, or we see Steph Castle be like a major high school recruit, go to UConn to win and play defense instead of just cook with high usage and stuff like that. We praise that, right? But I think that we also need to recognize that some of these dudes, they make bad decisions because they're young men, right? And it's sexy to go to USC. Like,
I'm like, who knows what the financials were too? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it may have been a case where it's like, hey, this is the best thing for my family financially. Yeah, I'm going to be here for a year. You can't say no. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think you have to kind of contextualize the season a little bit, or at least I do.
And I also think it's important to mention that like this team was way worse than it was supposed to be. Like Kobe Johnson should have taken steps as a shooter. I thought Iwuchukwu was going to be much better. Yeah. What's that center's name? Josh Morgan. Like he was like weirdly bad this year. Yeah. Like, so it's like, I'm supposed to have 2 lob targets. I'm supposed to have Kobe Johnson and Bronny knocking down shots for me.
And Bronny's gone.
And I've got Boogie to take the pressure off me. And it's like none of that panned out. Like DJ Rodman had a rough year. Like what are the odds of just like 4 or 5 of your teammates just having like bizarrely like either medical issues or like injuries or just a bad year? Like it's pretty shocking that it worked out how it did. I will give him credit for coming back and playing because like his stock was like still high, even with, like the turnover woes. Like I think it shows he cares. Like I think it shows he gives a crap. And I thought the motor was much better after he came back too. Like I think he got it. Like I think he kind of understood like, hey, people aren't like totally in love with what they're seeing. The one other thing I want to ask you about, like, does it concern you that he kind of can't jump? Like he does not get up at the rim. And that's like the other hang up I have with him. And like he tested poorly vertical wise at the combine. Like he's just, because of that build, he's not a guy that gets strong. Up.
You know what I mean?
But I don't want to like take away the strength. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want him to like.
Not saying Raymond Felton now, because I don't know how many people have seen what Raymond Felton looks like now. Like you can't say like, you can't look at him and be like, that guy used to be in the NBA now.
Mm-hmm.
But Raymond Felton was like a very powerful point guard, very effective in the NBA for a very long time when he was like, taking care of himself. And he like wasn't like a big vertical dude, but you still had a hard time dealing with him getting to the basket,
Mm-hmm.
and like dealing with him on the dribble. I think Isaiah Collier is probably a better athlete than what like prime Raymond Felton looked like, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
or like a Baron Davis, but Baron Davis was like freaky athlete. I'm
Baron
sorry. I'm
Davis had
sorry.
bounce too. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry I even mentioned that name, right? But I think probably we're in safe space with the Raymond Felton, like even prime Raymond, right?
Mhm.
I think that Collier is better than that. And I think that that still serves a purpose because he does have like strength and he does like get to his spots. In the NBA, is going to be different. It is weird though that like a guy who we look at and we say this guy is an athlete, that he's not as like springboard bouncy. And like we've talked about that before, even the show, that like he's more of a power athlete than he is like a Twitch athlete,
Yeah,
And
yeah. It's
this
an
is
overpowered.
kind of different because we don't see that in the NBA. We don't really see like these traditionally like just
Not at the guard
strong.
position.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, Jalen Brunson kind of is more like I would say power than like Twitch athleticism,
Yeah,
like
it's like a
very
power.
cerebral.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where Collier is more just like, I'm getting there. Like, it's more just like, you can't stop me.
yeah,
where Brunson, I think, because he doesn't have that same, like, downhill burst, it has to be a little more premeditated. Where I think Collier's just like, I know
yeah,
I'm getting there.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by him. I'm really interested to hear like how the workouts go for him and like
yeah,
what teams think of him, because like if you tell me that like he can catch and shoot, like there's a place for him, like period, point blank. If you've got, like we talked about Thon Connect, like, and it's different positions obviously, but like if you're just like a certain level of strong, I'm like fairly confident in your ability to defend in the NBA. If he's like willing to buy into that and he's just like an okay catch and shoot guy, it's like you've got a good player right there.
yeah.
I just have a hard time like seeing super high end upside because he can't jump, doesn't jump on the shot, pull up needs an overhaul. Like he's just like really behind where most guards are from a shooting standpoint. And I think the feel is like a little bit suspect relative to like past guard prospects that we've seen. So
Yeah,
like if you look at like what John Morant was like as a passer, you know what I mean? And like obviously like John Morant's like an all NBA player, but if you're talking about
100%.
like all-star upside, like those are the guys that you're talking about, like him and De'Aaron Fox, like those are the guys that you're comparing him to. And I don't think he has the same feel as those guys. I don't think he has the same feel as a guy like Jalen Brunson. Like
I just think
it's
that
a real thing.
I think that he just suffered too much developmentally this year, and I'm trying to like
Yeah, the
give him a
context was
pass
just
for
so
that.
bad.
Yeah,
And I don't think like I really don't think it's his fault. Like I on paper, like looking back, I don't mind the school choice. Like for me, it was like I don't like Bronny's school choice because he's going to where Isaiah Collier and Boogie Ellis are. You know what I mean? Like for me, it was
yeah,
like, what are you doing? Where for him, I liked it. I liked the idea of him and Collier together. I liked the idea of Kobe Johnson and these lob targets, and those guys did not pan out.
no,
And Collier suffered as a result. The assist numbers should have been better relative to the turnovers, but I do think he's still like turnover prone. I think both can be true.
yeah, 100%. Like I think he took better care of the ball of what like the criticism was, but the criticism was so low that it was almost impossible for not to have been better in the film.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? So I don't know. I feel for him,
Yeah.
and I think that again he has the potential to be like the ultimate like haha I told you so prospect.
I think so
You know?
too. And I think that like the difference between, I think the reason that he won't fall the way that a Nick Smith did is the body. Like with Nick Smith, it was like this guy's a twig, and like we had defensive concerns, and like with him it was the opposite. Like it was like, oh, we kind of buy the shot, but like can he go to the basket at all? And like with Collier, I think the fact that he's like just a force is going to help him a lot. Like I think that's going to
Yes.
comfortably kind of insulate his stock a little bit. Um, do you think there's a chance like that he goes way higher than people think? Like, do we think there's a chance that San Antonio is like,
Ooh.
we've got the spacing from Victor and like we're not married to any of these other guys other than like Vassell. So like maybe we just take the downhill guard. Like, is that a thing that could happen? Like,
I wouldn't put
I'm not, I
anything
wouldn't
past a
do it.
team that
I wouldn't
took
do it,
Josh
but
Primo in the draft. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
that's what I'm
Like,
saying. Like, I do wonder if like, I know ESPN had him around 20 today. Those are probably some of the most connected guys as far as like having finger on the pulse with regard to
sure.
stock. So I always kind of think that that's like interesting breadcrumb stuff, but yeah, part of me just wonders, like, is there a world where he goes really high?
I guess it would depend, like, and I hate to give such a cop-out answer, but what, like, is 8 what you're thinking? Like, the second pick for
That's what I
San
was thinking.
Antonio?
Like, is there a chance
Yeah.
he's like the 8th pick? That San Antonio's just like, that's the guard that we like.
If I
Or
had
is
to give
it
it in a percentage, I
mhm,
would probably say nothing higher than, like, a 30% chance. I think that
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think there's a chance, but I don't know if it's, like, I think if there was anything higher than, like, a 30% chance, he would be ranked higher on, like, ESPN's boards, like you're saying, but
Yeah.
I
And
wouldn't
like,
give it a non-zero chance, yeah.
but here, like, and then the thing is, like, if he doesn't go there, it's like Memphis, I don't think would take a guard. I don't think he's like what Utah would want next to Keontae George. Bulls have like a roster full of guards.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like an OKC guy, and again, it's a team with a lot of guards.
Mhm.
Sacramento, I don't think needs that. I don't think Portland would want another guy with like shooting questions. Maybe Miami, and then like Philly, I don't think he fits well next to Maxey. Like, there's just like not a lot of fits, and it's like Orlando doesn't need a guard that like has shooting problem. Like, you just go like further down. It's like Toronto wants a guard that can shoot next to Scotty Barnes.
Yeah.
Like, they have quickly. Like, the further down you go, it's just like that team doesn't need a guard. That team doesn't. Like, I do think there's a chance that like part of me thinks that he might fall, but then also it's like at a certain point, some teams got to take him.
I think the highest I could see him, and I know that we kinda, like, went past Sacramento, I wouldn't be surprised for Sacramento, right? Because
Yeah, it makes sense.
there's, like, a high possibility that they could be losing, like, the 3rd most important player on their team this free agency,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I could see that. I could see the Miami thing. Like, I think that if Pat Riley saw this dude working out, he would be like, "Yep, he's a Miami Heat player." You know what I mean? Like, I could see that. I could see a possible thing for Philadelphia, like, maybe you draft this dude and give him the Maxey treatment that Maxey had for a little while, like, coming
Yeah,
off the
yeah,
bench, second I mean, and they need players, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So, I I think the highest I could see him realistically being drafted is, like, that 13 spot to, or is 13 to Sacramento? I can't remember without looking.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
13.
13 yeah, okay, so, yeah, 13 to Sacramento. I think would be the highest. 20 seems like it's like the temperature check, but I like
Mm-hmm.
him a little bit more than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
I do
that's
too.
kind of where I am.
It's one of those things where like there's just it's so crazy. Like, I just keep thinking about like there's all these guards that are all in this class, and just like I go through the teams, and I'm like, I just don't know how many teams need or want a small guard this year. And like it's gonna like Collier might be the most interesting litmus test of that if he starts to slip.
I would just say that like Salon being a potential like 11, 12 pick in this draft with having as many holes in his game and his questions as he has, and the age difference between the two is not that sizable because he's taller, like I don't know. Like that's just like the weird thing about this draft is like Salon is like all of a sudden, and again, this might be the visibility thing that we talked about earlier. Like Salon might be a top 10 player while Collier might be like 20 in this year's draft.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's gonna be fascinating to monitor. Let's put a bow on this discussion.
Yeah.
We are as you mentioned, like we are recording early this week, so it's still gonna be out Monday. Stephen, what do you have coming out at NoCeilingsNBA.com this week?
Dude, in all honesty, I don't know. We're recording this so early that I don't know. I tell you have that I have an interesting, couple of prospects that will be interviewing.
Mm-hmm.
I might even just kind of like put pen to paper on like more prospects that I'm still like trying to like fill out. Like maybe that might be a piece that I'm still brainstorming right now. And shout out to Honey Badger real quick in the chat. Just said great stuff, learned a lot.
That's what
Thanks.
we want to hear.
Yeah, and I feel like I did too. Like in Maxwell, I think shows like this are important, and it's important not to overdo these types of things, in my opinion. Where we're like, "What do you think about this guy?" I don't know. What do you like? It's not great content all the time, but I think it is good. Like when we can kind of like temperature check. Like I feel like we're not the only ones that have questions about like some of these prospects.
Sure. And I think a lot of people can be declarative in a way that's like not necessarily helpful at times with prospects. Like, this guy's got to go in the first round, or like this guy's got to go here. Like, this guy stinks. And it's like, well, does he? Like, I think it can be really helpful to talk it through, especially just within the context of like, okay, what does this look like on an NBA team? And I feel like that was an important part of the discussion today. Is like, what is the NBA role going to look like for some of these guys?
For sure. But yeah, whenever I know what I'm gonna write about, I guess I'll let you know. But yeah, I'll have something out. I just had an Isaiah Crawford piece come out this past week. So if you haven't had a chance to go read that, please do. Love Isaiah Crawford. He's like my favorite. I'll just go ahead and put out. He's my favorite sleeper in this class because there's not a lot of
Ooh.
sleepers. He's
Yeah,
my favorite sleeper in this class. I have him in my top 45, and like I feel really really good about it. And he's like not done climbing, by the way.
I
So.
like that. I like that. I will have an article up on Collier. It's an article. I love it. I'm going really deep into Collier. Man, what a fascinating player. Talk about guys that have a hard time pinning down.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
You
But
want another 30 minutes just talking about
yeah,
Collier?
I will say like a lot of the stuff that I said about Saloon, I actually kind of feel about Collier as well. Where it's just like
Okay.
I think there's like a level of insulation based on size and physical tools for him, and I think the upside is like a little less likely to be attained to the level that like his biggest proponents will say that it is. But I think it's real. Like I think there's a real level of like, oh man, like this could be a nice, unique type of center that a lot of teams would like to have. So definitely a guy that I think I was a little too hard on at points throughout the year, and I'm excited to share that with everybody.
I can't wait to read that, dude.
Yeah. So thank you all for tuning in, especially the people live in the chat. Like you guys make the show a lot of fun. We love having you guys here. So thank you all for that, and we will see you all technically a week and a half from now when we're recording,
Yes.
but a week from when you're listening to this. Until next time, peace.
Much love, y'all.